Jimmy, listen bro, we gotta have an intervention, a little conversation about what's been going on. I want the DCU to succeed. I need it to succeed so that the reputation and notoriety of the DC brand as a whole can be restored in the eyes of the general public. Batman shouldn't be the only character casual viewers have any remote interest in. I'd say things are off to a good start with Superman. You can feel however you want about the movie itself, but what's important is that general moviegoers and critics liked it. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the second theatrical DCU entry, Supergirl. I guess this is somewhat controversial to say, but I don't think Supergirl was that bad of a movie. Not great or anything, I've definitely seen better comic book movies, but I also wouldn't put it on the same level of garbage as Wonder Woman 1984 or something. Thought it was just a fine watch. But my personal feelings on the movie are irrelevant to the topic at hand because we cannot ignore how this movie is bombing at the box office. Now, I don't think this is an immediate indicator of the universe being in shambles. I'm sure people are going to switch up if Clayface and Man of Tomorrow are well received. There's more anticipation going into those entries than there was for Supergirl, due to either being a continuation of something that was already well praised, or potentially offering something unique in the landscape of comic book movies. I do think people are overreacting in thinking that the universe is over, with certain responses ranging from believing James Gunn should be replaced to suggesting another universe reboot should take place, which is probably the worst thing any business executive could do. At this point, another reset would pretty much be a death sentence for the IP. The general audience would become incredibly jaded with 3 reboot attempts within the span of 15 years. The DCU is the only shot left at even remotely replicating the success of the MCU, so we just gotta come out swinging with what we got.
Let's just take the L and move on.
Thankfully, Supergirl was never going to be the movie that determined the trajectory of the DCU. At no point throughout her entire publication history was Supergirl ever a massive character that was meant to spearhead a new era or corner of the DC universe. Don't get me wrong, she's well known amongst the general public, but it'd be wrong to call her a heavy hitter. And her movie didn't do much to establish noteworthy world building outside of what was already established in Superman. That ties into any overarching story threads that are integral to the universe. DC Studios can recuperate their losses with their next set of films, but we do need to ensure certain priorities are met so that something like this doesn't happen again. Because if this was Wonder Woman, Lanterns, or Man of Tomorrow, then the concerns for the overall universe would start to become more justified. Supergirl had a lower worldwide opening weekend than movies like Joker 2, The Flash, The Marvels, and Morbius. It's estimated that it could lose the studio anywhere from $80 to $120 million depending on how it does in the long run. We live in an age where audiences are a lot less forgiving of mediocre superhero flicks than they were a decade ago. Back then, a subpar Marvel movie could make like 500 million globally. Nowadays, Marvel flicks of similar quality with high budgets get almost eviscerated critically and financially. You really can't afford to be stale or run-of-the-mill. And that sentiment holds even more true when it comes to characters that aren't as well known or aren't deemed heavy hitters. The Gunn needs to reassess, reload, and come out swinging with another banger. DC Studios has Man of Tomorrow and The Batman Part 2 lined up for next year. Obviously, the Batman universe is not a part of the DCU and is Elseworlds, but from an executive standpoint, it's still a DC Studios theatrical release that contributes to the types of projects greenlit under James Gunn and Peter Safran's leadership. A few fumbles here and there are nothing new for DC fans. We're gonna be alright.
We gonna be alright.
No, y'all ain't.
We gonna be alright.
Next year? Y'all ain't gonna be alright this year.
I think it's important for them to determine what movies should be slated for 2028 onward in order to maintain the momentum and hype surrounding the DCU if the preceding movies are successful. With the underwhelming reception to Supergirl, one might be led to believe that certain changes are being made to bring the major pillars of DC to the forefront sooner rather than later. None of this is 100% confirmed, but apparently there have been some rumblings going around that the untitled Bane and Deathstroke movie that was announced in late 2024 could potentially be the next DCU movie after Man of Tomorrow.
Nigga, what?
Now, it's important to note that we don't know anything about this movie other than the fact that Bane and Deathstroke are in it. It could be a wider team-up film where they are a part of a roster. Some have speculated that this could be something like a Secret Six project, or it could be a story centered on just those two villains specifically. We don't know. In hindsight, I'm not against the idea of lesser-known characters or villains getting their own projects. I do think DC Studios should somewhat stick to their guns with what they have planned and not significantly course correct because of the performance of one movie that isn't a major player. The biggest issue with the DCEU was how reactionary WB executives were, and how they took the wrong lessons from poorly received movies. However, movies on smaller characters are going to be a lot harder to pull off if you don't have the audience's overall investment in the wider universe. Sure, they've demonstrated that they're willing to pull up to a Superman movie, but I don't think they're as enthusiastic about characters that aren't known to carry their own franchise quite yet, which is why those types of projects have to be made with significantly lower budgets than that of an average blockbuster, and the scripts need to be airtight. Anything below an 8 out of 10 for a character like Deathstroke or Bane is a recipe for disaster, I'm not gonna lie. The movie isn't out yet, so we'll have to wait and see, but I think it's smart how the Clayface movie only has an estimated $40 million budget, so if the movie is well received by critics and audiences, it wouldn't be much of a hassle to make a profit. And I think the movie could offer some uniqueness that audiences of comic book movies have an appetite for. It doesn't look like your average run-of-the-mill comic book flick, being a small budget R-rated body horror movie, toppled with Mike Flanagan being a well-respected horror director and writer. Clayface wasn't part of the DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters slate, rather it was pitched to Gunn and Safran by Mike Flanagan, and they were so impressed with what was shown that they decided to move forward with the project. That should more or less be what drives them to want to make movies like Clayface to begin with. If there's some desire to tackle a movie on a lesser known character, it has to be a result of the script being spectacular. It was stated a while back that more theatrical films would be centered on characters people are familiar with rather than ones they don't know. Yeah, you should probably just stick to that for the time being. If they really are going forward with this Bane and Deathstroke movie, one of two things need to happen combined with having a really low budget, or a combination of both. It needs to either be accompanied by The Brave and the Bold releasing in the same year, or have Batman be part of the script. I don't like to consider Deathstroke a primary Batman villain, as he's more of an antagonist for Nightwing and the Titans, but Batman is the common thread between him and Bane. Despite the fact that a Batman movie set in its own universe is releasing next year, people are still hungry for the DCU Batman. In terms of putting him in the movie, I'm not talking about showing a silhouette or having him appear in a way where you can't see him in full like in Creature Commandos. I obviously don't want it executed in a way that just feels like fan service nonsense. Rather, I think it could serve the world building if the movie highlights specific metahumans being transferred from wherever they're currently being held to salvation. And Bane and Deathstroke's encounters with Batman could establish their significance and competence as villains, as well as how they were captured in the first place if they were in Gotham. If DC Studios really knew ball, they'd have Batman as an antagonist of some sort, doing something that's never been done before in a live-action superhero film, where it's from a villain's perspective and a mainstream superhero serves as an obstacle. So if The Brave and the Bold somehow isn't ready for a 2028 release, Jimmy Gunn, this is your chance to give audiences a little taste and create more interest in the movie itself.
Listen to everybody. Nobody believes in you. What are you prepared to do about it? Don't let no one come into your house, take your meal, do what you need to do today. I'm not nervous. I'm just telling you.
If they're not going to tie in with the overall narrative, the existence of movies centered on lower profile characters needs to be justified with a really strong script, which I thought was the case for Supergirl before it released in theaters, because it was only the second DCU theatrical movie due to the script being completed faster than expected. Not only that, but they gave the writer the keys to write a Teen Titans movie and Wonder Woman movie because of her work on Supergirl before it came out. So here I was thinking, damn, that Supergirl script must have been a masterpiece or something.
Damn. He don't got a clue in the fucking world.
I don't think the script was awful, but I'm left wondering why this was the project that gave DC enough confidence to give the writer the opportunity to tackle two massive characters / teams. Maybe you could argue that the original script was hindered by the editing process and choices made by the director, but we can't say for certain. The other thing that doesn't make the writer look good is how she misunderstood the ending of the Woman of Tomorrow book. Incoming spoilers for Supergirl, so if you don't want to know what happens at the end of the movie, you can skip to the timestamp on screen. We good? Alright, cool. Apparently, Kara killing Krem of the Yellow Hills at the end was planned as far back as the pitch for the movie, because Ana Noguera believed that Ruthie killed Krem in the far future in the comic, but that's not what happened. After Ruthie refuses to kill him, you find out that Krem served a 200-year sentence in the Phantom Zone, and the ending of the book jumps to when his sentence is over, where he's changed his ways and is asking Ruthie, who is now an old woman, for forgiveness. All Ruthie does is smack him with her cane and walk away after he's done rambling. He doesn't die or anything.
But this is not. It's supposed to be ambiguous. He's supposed to be alive at the end.
Okay.
That's why he grabs his head. Yes, it's supposed to be like, yeah, Ruthie does not forgive him. Ruthie still fucking hates him, bops him on the head, and then walks away. Like that's supposed to be the.
I don't take issue with wanting to deviate from the source material if it comes from a place of believing that certain writing decisions would benefit the story being told, understanding the original context and seeing how it could better translate in an adaptation. My only issue comes from the fact that Kara only killed Crumb at the end of the movie because the writers somehow misinterpreted the ending of the original story, despite the fact that Tom King is literally part of the DCU writers room. Did nobody feel the need to correct her, or did they just assume the change to the ending was intentional? Did she somehow never have a conversation with the original author? This is someone who's claimed to have read the book many times.
I would go through, I've read it so many times, the process is probably really boring. I would dog ear different pages and think about what could be useful, how and when. Circle pieces of dialogue, sometimes take panels that I thought were particularly beautiful or important to the story. And then the next step is you have to let the comic go, right? You have to kind of fully immerse yourself in it so you know its bones and you know what you love. And then you have to say, okay, but now we have to turn it into a movie, and comics do one thing, movies do another.
Embarrassing!
The next course of action shouldn't be to just immediately rush and greenlight projects surrounding the other members of the Trinity if they aren't ready. The Wonder Woman movie and The Brave and the Bold are currently being written, and we know who the writers are for both. All they can really do now is put all hands on deck for quality control and not make any of the same mistakes. Because if you thought Supergirl not being well received was bad enough, a Batman or Wonder Woman movie being bad would be catastrophic. Many people have championed the idea of replacing the current writer for Wonder Woman since it's somehow still only in the early stages. If they don't want to do that and still maintain their faith in Ana Nogueira's efforts as a screenwriter, then I hope that Supergirl served as a valuable learning lesson for improvement if DC Studios wants to get the Wonder Woman movie out in a timely manner. Because it was stated last year that she's been writing it for a while. Some of those same fans complaining about the DCU taking too long to introduce Wonder Woman would have to wait even longer if a new writer were to be brought on board to start from scratch. But if they're willing to wait that long for what's believed to be a better chance of getting a great movie, then by all means. And who knows, maybe they could search for a more competent writer who can finish the script in a timely manner. Regardless of whether the current writer is kept or not, they definitely need to take a closer look at that script. They also definitely could have found a more competent screenwriter for The Brave and the Bold, but I think what makes that project stand out from the rest is how James Gunn is the most directly involved in the crafting of that movie out of all the projects he himself is not writing or directing, due to having a very specific idea of how to tackle a new iteration of Batman. Whether or not you trust James Gunn's judgment of a good script he didn't write after Supergirl is up to you.
And then there's other projects in which I have very specific ideas about how it should go. So Batman Brave and the Bold is one of those things. We're working with a writer now. It's going really well, but I had a very specific idea about how it should go. And so I'm just very involved in the process of that film.
No,
what
of course.
matters is the character, the story. And I think that we have a really, really good story now for what's happening with Batman.
Dude, I'm so stoked.
A safe bet for the time being would probably be to use the Trinity to prop up lesser known characters in their own projects, something like Batman popping up in the Bane and Deathstroke movie to further add to the world building. Locations like Themyscira and Gotham City have already been established in the continuity. Paradise Lost is a prequel series centered on the Amazons prior to Diana's birth. It's said to still be in development, but only time will tell if the show actually manifests. I think it's fine to have less experienced writers tackle certain projects, but writers and directors with experience and a decent background should be the ones involved in the movies and shows centered on DC's tentpole characters. Don't know how Lanterns will turn out from an adaptation standpoint, but you've got Chris Mundy as the showrunner, co-creator, and co-writer. He was the showrunner of Ozark and wrote a handful of episodes. He was also an executive producer on True Detective. Damon Lindelof was the co-creator and showrunner of The Lost and the HBO Watchmen series. Mike Flanagan is a well-renowned horror director and writer who wrote the script for Clayface. On everybody's soul, James Gunn is gonna deliver once again with Man of Tomorrow. Even with the Jimmy Olsen and Gorilla Grodd show, the people behind it are known for the Netflix mockumentary American Vandal that was critically acclaimed. Talent that's already proven themselves should be on Wonder Woman, The Brave and the Bold, an inevitable Flash movie. Might as well bring out the big guns for the characters most of the casual audience actually care about. Studios can no longer get away with releasing comic book movies that are just okay, or cases where people perceive it as bad. It's a good and a bad thing because it creates more risk of bad word of mouth when releasing a new entry, but it also forces them to make really good stuff if they want any profitability and widespread success. The underperformance of one movie that's not even the launching point of a universe in its infancy is not the end of the world. There's still plenty of projects in the pipeline that can get audiences invested in the overall storytelling. But if Lanterns is bad, I refuse to let a fumble like that slide. Don't mess up, bro.
Jimmy, Come on, Jimmy. You know you owe me.